You know, as I mentioned earlier, and as it says on our bulletins, today's Christ the King Sunday, or Reign of Christ Sunday. According to our United Methodist Book of Worship, Christ the King Sunday, it's the last Sunday in our Christian year, and it's intended to be, well, a time when we pause to celebrate the coming reign of Christ, when he returns and God's creation is restored to the way God has always planned it. And we celebrate that Christ is rightly our King. Christ the King. King. What comes to your mind when you hear that word, king? I mean, what is a king? What does a king do? What does that mean for us? Good questions, huh? Typically, when we think about kings and what kings do, earthly kingdoms come to mind, right? Think of the guy sitting there on the throne and that funny-looking crown on his head and all of that stuff. Bossing people around. You go here, you go there, you do this. Right? The Oxford English Dictionary defines king as the male ruler of an independent state, especially one who inherits the position by birth. He rules. Okay? He's a ruler. What does a ruler do? And I'm not talking about the little wooden ones. I'm talking about the people ones. A ruler is a person who exercises government or dominion. He has authority over things, okay? Things are under his control. So, a king is someone who rules, who has control over others, who live within the king's area of control or power, right? We all know that. Just bringing that back up, get it fresh in our mind. And we also know that our earthly kings have had a less than stellar track record. Because even a cursory look at our human history on this earth shows that a lot of the earthly kings were susceptible to all of the same problems that all of us have. The problems that come from our innate human sinfulness. And eventually, the kings, those who had immense power, were corrupted by the power that they had. And because of the power that they had, they began to see themselves as being superior to others. That they were somehow better than the people in their kingdom. And every time that happened, trouble came close behind. Even now, we can, in this modern age, we can see how power can color our thinking and cloud our judgment. Because it does. It does it to all of us. Whether you want to admit it or not, our social status as middle class can sometimes incite us to think that, well, we're better off than, which kind of means that we're somehow superior to those who don't have the same kind of lives that we have. It's not pretty. It's not pretty at all. But it's true. It is. Think about it. Be honest now. Be honest with yourself. Because how many of us in that dark privacy of our sinful human hearts have a tendency to think of ourselves as being superior to at least some of the people we know of or know about? Maybe it's those who suffer from drug or alcohol addictions, or those who have a mental illness, or those who come from a different ethnic background, or the very poor, or those who have a different sexual orientation or gender identity, and they're not like us. And we sometimes look at them as being less than are we. And that's a problem. Because you see, each of us, every single one of us, have those areas within our lives where we can influence what is going on around us. You see, each of us, male or female, in our own way, have dominion over, we rule over our own little kingdom. We do. Well, we might be feel so others, have power over us. But even if we hide it in the confines of our hearts, we rule over, or we feel ourselves to be superior to some of our neighbors that we encounter in and around our own little kingdoms. And when we feel ourselves to be superior to others, it doesn't turn out well. Because when we feel ourselves to be superior to others, it's so much easier to either take advantage of them or to simply ignore their plight. They're not important to us. We got stuff of our own to take care of. And that's the problem that humankind has always had. It's been around. We didn't just suddenly fall off the bandwagon here. It's been around. It's been a problem that has dogged us every step of the way throughout our existence. Just look at the Ezekiel passage again in your bulletin insert. And God, speaking through the prophet, he denounces the human tendency to abuse whatever power we have over others. Right? Talking about the fat sheep and the lean sheep. The fat sheep are the ones who have the power. And he says, you shove with shoulder and flank, and with your horns you ram all of the weak sheep until you've scattered them outside. We misuse our power to take care of ourselves. And that's a problem. Because that's really an abuse of power. Whenever we view power, whatever power we might have, as a means to lift ourselves up above others, we're abusing the power that we have. Most properly used, the holder of power serves others, rather than demanding that others serve him or her. The proper use of power seeks to benefit many, all, rather than one. And that's how God looks at it. In the divine view, kingship power takes on a different sort of role. Rather than bossing people around, power in the divine view seeks to serve those others. Did you catch that in the Ezekiel passage? Because God, speaking through the prophet, he tells us how power should be used. He says, I myself will search for my flock and seek them out. As a shepherd seeks out the flock when some of the flock have been scattered, I will seek out my flock. I will rescue them from all of the places where they were scattered. I will gather them and lead them from countries and people. I will bring them to their own land. I will feed them. God says he will take care of those. See, that's how a king is supposed to operate. To take care of those within that king's sphere of influence. So he tells us that. The Lord our God, the divine ruler of all things, everywhere, seeks to serve rather than be served. And he tells us how he's going to do that, and we celebrate that reality today. He speaks, he's being very metaphorical here, but he talks about the king that he's going to send them. He talks about David. What he's actually saying, because David has already died by the time this prophecy comes about. Okay? He's speaking of someone of David's lineage, from the house of David. He is speaking about Jesus Christ as the shepherd, the shepherd king that will come and care for all of God's people. That's the king whose coming reign we celebrate today. And that king, that shepherd king, speaks to us again today through Matthew's gospel, and he shows once again God's will, God's desire for those of us who have abilities, to use what we have to help those who don't have as much. Doesn't matter if they've been good or bad or any of that stuff. We're to use what we have to help those who don't have as much. We're called to do that again today. And to keep doing it until Jesus returns. And that day will come. It's going to happen. But until that happens, in the meantime, as we wait, in the areas where we have some influence, we can make an impact on what's going on, our little kingdoms, if you will. Within those little kingdoms, however big they are, they're still our kingdom. We can still do stuff, we can still cause stuff to happen within those kingdoms. Let's each of us strive to make the best of whatever power we have to help those who are less fortunate than we are. Feed the hungry. Feed them in body and spirit. Help to supply the area food pantries. Carry a bag of groceries over to somebody who's maybe going through difficult times, right? You just showed a marvelous example of that this last week as people from this community gathered together on Thanksgiving Day to have that meal for people. We can do that within our own little kingdoms. Spend time with the lost, the lonely, the confused, the downcast, and the outcast. Share the love of Christ with them to feed their spirits. Let them know that they really do matter. You can do that. We can all listen. We can all sit down beside somebody. Welcome the stranger. Visit those who are in prison. And when I speak of prison, I'm speaking of more than just the brick and mortar buildings with the little bars on the window, the Crowbar Hotel, okay? There are people in those kinds of prisons. There are also people who have imprisoned themselves, who are kind of locked up in their own little prisons that they have kind of constructed around themselves, feeling that nobody can possibly love even the likes of them, but they're wrong because you can. Visit the people who are in that prison. I could go on and on and on, but you get my drift, okay? The truth is that each of us has power in our own little kingdoms, and we can use that power to serve God by serving our neighbors. And each time we do that, every time we do that, God's kingdom comes just that much closer, or maybe that much closer, to completion. And remember this too. Remember this too. Because as you go out there and you seek to work in your own little kingdom, you're not going out all by your lonesome. You're not. It's not just your own strength that you can draw on. Because God's Holy Spirit, the Spirit that dwells within every believer, is with us every step of the way. Our heavenly King is with us to guide us and to support us as we attempt to make the best of the life that we can offer within our own little kingdoms. You are not alone. Listen to the urges that the Spirit will place on your hearts. And then go out into your kingdom and act on those urges. And you will not be alone. Praise be to God. Amen.